for those historic moments as Nicolás Maduro and his wife were arraigned on American soil. Sam, tell us what it was like inside that room.
Hallie, one of the most remarkable arraignments you could ever imagine, right? You've covered court cases throughout the course of your career. You're hard-pressed to remember anything like this. So Nicolás Maduro walks into the courtroom with his wife, Celia Flores, right around noon. And immediately, so first of all, he is wearing orange garb from the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, a black shirt over that. Hard to tell, Hallie, whether or not he was handcuffed or not when he first walked in, but he is right away shaking hands with all of his attorneys. He nods at the people in the gallery, both on the side where the public was seated as well as the journalists. It almost looked like at one point he cracked a smile, was greeting his attorneys, getting situated. His wife came in as well, Celia Flores, I might add. It was hard to tell at first, but then this was brought up by their attorneys, had bandages on her face and had bruising around her eyes. They discussed the fact that she was injured during detention and even mentioned possible fractures to her back or other parts of her body when the question around medical attention came up. So we'll get back to that in a second, but when I say remarkable, so they come in, Maduro has 4 U.S. Marshals behind him. They sit directly behind Maduro. While he is seated then and facing the judge, Judge Hellerstein addresses the court. He proceeds to read the charges, certainly the narco-terrorism, the cocaine importation conspiracy, the weapons-related charges, gets through all of that, and then says to Nicolás Maduro, "Are you Nicolás Maduro?" And he says, Hallie, first, "I am Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela. I am president of the Republic of Venezuela. I have been kidnapped since January 3rd. I was captured at my home in Caracas, Venezuela," which at that point, Hallie, the judge steps in and says, "Wait a minute. We're going to get to all of that. I just want to know if you're Nicolás Maduro."
Interesting.
And he says, "Yes, I am." And in fact, he's wearing headphones the entire time, right? Because he's hearing the interpretation, the translation. He actually interrupts the she's trying to articulate to the judge and to the court what Maduro is saying. He's so eager to sort of state his case. So again, this was very anomalous in terms of what happens in what are normally perfunctory arraignments and hearings. So they go through that. The judge reads through the charges, okay? Then he asks him whether or not he's seen the indictment. And Maduro and his attorney, Barry Pollock, who, by the way, represented Julian Assange, well known in the field of criminal defense. He's also known for negotiating a plea agreement to get Assange out of jail, also represented one of the Enron executives who was fully acquitted on criminal fraud charges. He's representing Maduro in this case, and he said, "I have briefed my client, but he hasn't actually read the indictment." And so then the judge says, do you want the court to read the indictment? Maduro says, "No, I don't," but he does want to have consultation on it. The entire time this is going on, both Maduro and Flores are taking just scrupulous notes. I mean, you could see their notepads when they stood up at the end of the court proceeding, just filled with information. Maduro wanted to make sure that the court knew those were his notes. He's entitled to them. Am I allowed to keep them? The judge said, "Sure, you can keep the notes." So this all goes on, and then the judge asks Maduro whether or not he has been briefed on his rights, and by rights not just to counsel, but also to silence. And when that exchange goes back and forth again with the translator, he says, "This is the first I've been told of that." It's not clear whether or not Maduro was referring to whether or not he has to speak with police and law enforcement, or whether it was right to counsel, or what aspect of his rights he was just being informed about for the first time. That was a very interesting interaction as well. And of course, the pleas, right? So we get to the pleas. The judge asks Maduro how he pleads to these 4 counts. He says, "Soy inocente. I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man." At which point the judge again intervenes and says, "Okay, we were just looking for guilty or not guilty. Not a fuller explanation. Don't worry, there is going to be time for that." Very similar, by the way, with Celia Flores as well. She says, "Yes, I am Celia Flores, First Lady of the Republic of Venezuela." She acknowledges that she's seen a summary of the indictment, but not the actual indictment itself, and goes on and says, we're okay to waive the reading at this time. She planned on getting fully briefed, but he says, "You know your rights," and she says, "Yes, I do." She also says, "Not guilty, completely innocent," when she is asked whether or not she is guilty of those crimes. The narco-terrorism is just for Maduro, but the other 3 counts do apply to Celia Flores. So this is all transpiring, Hallie, and then we find out, do they have a right to consular notification?
That's right.
And they are both interested, both Maduro and his wife, in speaking with someone from a consular figure from their own government to get more information. Absolutely interested in that. And then one of the most bizarre things happens at the very end of this very brief arraignment. It was, 30 minutes or so. Maduro turns around, waves to the crowd. Not clear if he's waving at someone in particular or just in general, but a man stands up, and I want to quote this directly to you so I don't get it wrong. He says, you will pay on behalf of Venezuela. And Maduro says, in the name of God, I will be free. This is all happening at an arraignment in front of dozens of people, right? I mean, we just know this is not normal playbook legal sort of stuff. So
not at
all
all.
of that,
Sam,
I would just raise one other thing, and I'm sure you'll have some follow-ups here. If I may just raise one other point, which is that Barry Pollack, the attorney for Maduro, said that I absolutely plan on filing motions regarding the legality or illegality, and he used the word of Maduro's abduction, and also pointed out that he is a head of state and afforded certain rights of immunity. So expect in the days and months to come, those motions will be forthcoming. But they're not right now. Next steps in this, March 17th is 60 days from now. That's the next court hearing that's scheduled at the moment with Judge Hellerstein, and that's about discovery and sharing information that the prosecution has with Maduro and his legal team and Flores and her legal team. But just an extraordinary 30 minutes in U.S. federal court that just transpired.
Sam, a stunning play-by-play from you. I want you to I have some follow-ups for you, but I want to explain to people what they're seeing here. This is a live shot from above. We expect Nicolás Maduro and his wife to leave court. They will be transported back to that facility where they will be held behind bars for the remainder of these court proceedings. Sam, let me ask you about this outburst in court. Again, not something we typically see, as we have said so often over the course of the last couple of days here. Do we know who the person was that stood up and, it sounds like, Sam, yelled at Nicolás Maduro?
He did. He did. I wouldn't say he yelled. He just said, matter-of-factly, you will pay. The court officer there immediately pointed at the man and told him to stop talking. And I did see probably 2 minutes later, once the arraignment was over and everyone was preparing to leave the courtroom, he was apprehended by officials and taken away. What the consequences will be, not quite clear. But as we have this conversation about someone standing up in the face of Maduro, I will tell you, at 500 Pearl Street, where we are right now, the site of many a protest, there's dozens of people right now with Venezuelan flags that are happy and cheering the end of Maduro as the leader of Venezuela and calling for his justice, while just across basically a divide, there's a whole group of other individuals that are concerned with the manner in which the U.S. carried out this military action, and they're saying that it's illegal. So you have sort of these conflicting viewpoints on the doorsteps of the federal courthouse as this man, who to this point is unidentified, stands up solely, no one else was standing, and looks right at Maduro as he's waving and says, you will pay for this.
It sounds as though, Sam, that Maduro had a degree of command in the room, the ability to make those remarks about his character and about his innocence to the judge. Sometimes in these arraignments, we hear just a single word or two from defendant. That was not the case here. Maduro addressing the person who stood up in court and addressed him. Was that your sense of how the proceedings went?
1,000%. And I will tell you, for Venezuelans who have lived under this regime, they're familiar with his showmanship. Talked about Peter Alexander this morning, the dancing on stage that the U.S. government in the recent weeks interpreted as some sort of act of defiance. Well, this is someone that clearly felt like a showman when he walked into the room, which I think is what was most striking to many of us. I mean, here he is walking in under the custody of U.S. Marshals, and he's nodding to everybody there, even kind of cracking a smile, waving as he leaves the courtroom. It was almost like he felt like he had a command of what's going on. Obviously, this is someone who's been the president of a country for the last 10 plus years, but he was literally interrupting the translator when she was trying to translate what he was saying and continuing this commentary with the judge when the judge was only looking for, 1 or 2 word answers. Now, obviously, he probably didn't understand the exact protocols of the U.S. legal system, but it was incredible to see just the presence that he had in that courtroom, that he felt comfortable enough to act as if he was running the show, not necessarily, the judge and the justice officials.
Maduro, it seemed at points, Sam, acknowledged that he didn't have command of the U.S. justice system. At one point saying to the judge, I didn't know I had some of those rights, more or less, as we are seeing now, some of the movement now from outside court. Sam, stick with me, because I have to ask, you mentioned seeing visible bandages and what appeared to be bruising on Celia Flores. Any visible sign of injury on Nicolás Maduro?
No, none. His physical stature is just so tall. He was taller than the other 4 people that brought him into the room. He was erect. He felt, very energetic. He didn't seem like someone who had been injured. I mean, obviously, we've been documenting the fact that Maduro keeps showing thumbs up every time he is in front of a camera, whether that's at, the DAA processing department in Chelsea, or it's underneath, you know, the chopper as he's getting onto a helicopter at a helipad. He seems to be very much projecting this image of power. He did not seem injured. His gait was normal, but it was surprising for sure, once you really started to pay attention to it, to see exactly what Celia Flores' face looked like. I mean, there were clearly bandages there, obvious bruising, and I have a feeling that that's going to be brought up front and center here before too long.
Sam, stand by for 1 minute, because we are seeing now this movement here in Manhattan, in New York City, what appears to be Maduro leaving court. Let me bring in Tom Winter, who has tracked movements like these countless times over the years. Where does Maduro head next? Where does Celia Flores head next?
Right, so they're coming out of what's called as Park Row. After 9/11, how this whole area was sealed and locked down. After coming out of that federal courthouse, the green vehicle there is known as a Bearcat. That's a heavily armored vehicle, and the NYPD Highway Patrol now in the lead. This is also next to their headquarters. So this area is always generally very secure in lower Manhattan. They've obviously got what's called a route set up. You'll see the police officers blocking traffic. So they will now be able to quickly take him. I have not received any reports that the Brooklyn Bridge has been shut down, so it looks like they'll probably get him back to the Wall Street heliport. This whole thing should take only several minutes at this point, because they can block this off easily, and they've done this many times before. The reason for this, I know folks are going to look at it and say, look, this is an enormous amount of taxpayer dollars, and it is, that's being used to do this. It's just that in order to get him safely there without having an incident and disrupting this whole judicial process, having any civilians injured, any members of the public, they want to be able to get him to a spot where they can just fly him to Brooklyn. You might remember in previous high-profile proceedings, I'm thinking of El Chapo, when he was tried in New York. In other cases, they want to make sure that there's no members of the public that are injured. And to do that, they'd have to shut down the Brooklyn Bridge or other major arteries in New York City. And that's just something that becomes untenable. So it's easier to fly them, and all indications are at this point, we'll know fairly shortly here, because they have an opportunity either to get on the bridge or to get to the heliport. They will likely